Brandon Knott. I'm a product leader at UiPath focused on attended automation and our Robot for Every Person initiative. And today I'm delighted to bring a topic to you from our friends at SDI around their citizen development program, their journey into both RPA and that citizen development and the integration with those business units. And I'd like to start with John. John, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you wouldn't mind, please give us a brief introduction of your background as well as SDI's journey into RPA.
Sure. Really appreciate the introduction. John Delligatti, and I am the Director of Digital Supply Chain Transformation here at SDI. SDI is branded as the Digital Supply Chain Company, so I think it's a pretty cool title for one to have personally. And essentially what that involves is me taking any and all of our processes and thinking about them in a different way, and through this lens, through RPA, and understanding our opportunities to automate those processes or make them better. It's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of the program is, we get to take a second look at these processes that we might have built 10 years ago based on technology from 10 years ago. Maybe there's better ways to do it, but whether we have to brute force it with a robot or design a better process with a robot, that's where UiPath and SDI come together to digitally transform supply chains around the world.
Awesome. It's so interesting that you bring that up right out of the gates, because that's a question that we get all the time. How should I think about process reengineering versus let's automate on top of what we have right now? How have you thought about that? And do you have any rules of thumb or kind of base position on which processes go which way?
Sure. So, and you mentioned my background, so I think it is important. I started through the sourcing and procurement arm of the organization, and I was technical. I would handle a lot of reporting. And as we implemented analytics and then RPA, it was sort of a natural transition for me. And one of the things that I was able to make hay with, as I advanced in my career, was I would just ask why when things didn't make sense. And it sounds so simple, but really you have to have that courage to go up to someone who's been doing something for 10 years. And as the new person, or as the person who, hey, listen, I understand that I might not have the experience you have, but why are we doing this, right? And whether that's with RPA or with any process, that's really powerful to have. And I think that, root cause, getting to the root of our issues, really helps us determine whether we want to just automate something as is, or whether we want to re-engineer the process, and automation will likely, be a part of that re-engineered process. It's really the ability to ask why. It's not just sit in a meeting and make this because I told you to. It's what's the context here? What's the bigger picture? Can we tie in more processes, right? Do we need to limit the scope? It's all those things factor into it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting because there's a lot of research out there around the tasks that we do and how we actually start to let tasks define us and define our roles. So having that curiosity, I'd love to get your perspective on it. The curiosity gets you the ticket to the show. It doesn't guarantee success, right? You've got to work with people to unwind some of those preconceived ideas around what work is and how it factors into them. What's that look like for you at SDI?
Well, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a challenge. It's not always roses and butterflies. I mean, don't get me wrong. We had some really nice advancements right out of the gate that, that executive buy-in is crucial. And we proved initially, you gave us something, we did it, so we did have that. Now, there were certain things where we certainly failed, where I would be in meetings with people well above my pay grade and telling me I can automate something. And I'm sitting there saying, well, I can't because I need these rules to be defined, or I need some sort of data, to base that off of, So I would say it took us a little while to get buy-in across the company. We had the executive buy-in, which was crucial because they removed barriers for us. If we had issues, we were able to kind of, get them removed. But I would say it really took about, 9 months of working with these folks to get them, and many unsuccessful meetings. Like I said, people that show up and say, hey, this is a great process. And I say, I really don't think so. And, well, what are these bots good for? Well, these bots can't do 100% of everything. Now, if we take your process, right, that takes you 10 hours a week, could we automate 8 hours of it? And those exceptions become the 2 hours of work you do when you talk about redefining work. That's what we're doing here. We'll try to fully automate anything we can, but there is power to incremental improvements in repetitive processes. And we've done a great job of displaying that value, as you'll hear, coming up.
That's great. And I actually, I want to come back to that in maybe a couple of minutes, because that human robot collaboration and cooperation, I think is a really interesting theme, and I'd like to learn more about that. But first, I want to back up a little bit and take a look at some of the drivers that caused you to consider RPA to begin with. And both at the macro level, I mean, what's happening in your industry, at the direct level for you and your organization, what's happening internally. Can you share with us just some of those motivations?
Sure. So now, even before COVID, these things were happening. As we know, COVID accelerated everything. How many times have you heard of supply chain in the last year compared to the rest of your life? Right? Come on. So that was definitely a driver, especially for the citizen development team. There's no coincidence that the citizen development team ramped up in the midst of this COVID, issue that we're having. But in general, the supply chain, and SDI is an MRO company, which means we work the tailspin, right? We don't buy the syrups that go in the sodas. We buy the bearings that run the machines that put the stuff in the sodas, right? So we're a rounding error to some of these big companies. Now, don't get me wrong, we do important work and we can translate tremendous value to these clients, as a leveraged play. However, I mentioned it earlier, the way the company was designed, and you'll find that, again, we're a digital supply chain company, but the people who consider themselves our competitors call themselves integrated suppliers generally. And what you'll find is that industry is about 10 years behind technology-wise. Things that we come out with, the tech titans came out with 10 years ago, and we're suddenly able to adopt it because either it's becoming more readily available and less expensive, or it's more widely accepted in the industry / like an expectation, right? How the major leaders drive the expectation of faster deliveries, updates, automated, order processing, things like that. Well, if it's being driven by the outside forces, we have no choice but to take the torch, or else we're going to be left in the dust. So those are some of the drivers to automate that. And those are the drivers of the industry, right? I mean, they relate to the technology for sure. SDI in particular, we really caught lightning in a bottle with this, and we are by far the leaders in our industry in terms of this technology. We're a few years ahead of the competition, but we know that they could catch up. So we have to keep innovating. And the specific goal of the automation at SDI, right? Yeah, and I know it's a loaded question, so I'm coming back to that. But our challenge was, how do we grow at scale? It was not to reduce labor. It was not to get rid of people. It was to right size employee account ratios, or to service these new clients, because I'm telling you, we have some of the biggest names in supply chain as some of our logos, the titans out there, and they're relying on us to innovate their MRO supply chain. We know that if we're not keeping up with the game and able to provide them what they need, they could look elsewhere. So we're trying to be able to absorb that business with appropriately increasing the staff. We can't double the business by doubling the employees. It's just not going to work for our business model.
Right. And it's interesting because when RPA first came out, a lot of that narrative was around headcount reduction. And a lot of the early business cases were actually built on that cost savings. But more and more, we're seeing the expansion, the growth, the redistribution of people into higher value activities as being that primary driver.
Exactly. I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, that's what we preach, and we're very careful about the messaging because we understand it. To your point, it was the first place the industry went, right? And sure, it works in the executives in the C-suites, but then when you go down to the person who, you're going to automate their job, how are they going to take that, right? Now, maybe you have extremely well-defined SOPs and you can do all of it without them even knowing, but I'm pretty sure you don't, at least most companies, right? So fact of the matter is, when you approach it from this angle, and not just, you got to put your money where your mouth is. You need to mean it. These people, and it's why I mentioned that it took us, about 9 months to get that traction. People realized, wow, these guys can help me. These guys are not trying to take my desk. They're trying to make me work more efficiently. They're trying to allow me to be a better employee and develop professionally. It's not even, sure, SDI selfishly would love the increased productivity, but what's more valuable to your career? High value activities or punching keys into Excel, right?
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned a couple of times the cost pressures and the competitive nature of the business. tell me, how do you think about value? How do you think about ROI? And what are some of the drivers that you're keeping track of, both in the citizen developer context as well as just the overall RPA context?
Sure. So, I mean, our company, the way we recognize the savings is a bit different. It's not necessarily reported on the P&Ls. It's taken at a macro level of efficiency, which I thought was interesting because we do track the hours, and I take credit for them, and so does the rest of the team. I mean, I brag about these guys all the time. So, trust me, people know. They're here today. That being said, the company tracks overarching metrics, right, to keep track of the efficiency. And what I thought was fantastic, we're a transaction, we clear a lot of transactions. So amount of POs per head count across the company, not even just buyers, just the whole company, things like that. The amount of POs that get kicked out to a match exception because there's errors in the process and these types of things. And every single one of those discernible metrics fell off a cliff when we developed a process to automate it. So while I do understand a lot of people do go straight for that ROI, we've essentially got the buy-in from the executive level to the point where they're like, yeah, we know it's worth it. Just save me some time. And they view it as a holistic approach because yes, RPA is a major factor, but there are also other technical initiatives, all coinciding with each other. And they view it as a big push into the digital transformation, again, digital supply chain transformation, that overall our metrics will increase. But it is certainly, I mean, I'm a data geek at heart, right? I run the business intelligence program here as well. And the stats are fantastic. I mean, you just see the numbers of orders processed going up, the numbers of exceptions going down. It's just tremendous.
That's excellent. So I want to now get into that citizen developer aspect and the human and the robot interaction. If you ask the average COE, can business users develop processes, you're likely to come across some skepticism. And that makes sense. If you look at the classic models of software development, there's quite a lot of training involved. There's a lot of controls and processes, and people spend their entire careers perfecting these. These are important aspects of our world. And when you introduce business users and citizen development, there can be a skepticism that how does somebody without that context operate effectively in that space? So I'm playing the devil's advocate here. What has your experience been as you've brought citizen developers into an objective which you have C-suite expectations of very high returns?
Sure. So a couple things. Number one, I made the joke, and I don't want to put the pressure on any of these folks, but the people that were selected are essentially an all-star team. And they'll grin and they'll blush over there, but it's true. We didn't just ask anybody. It was a requirement that they had, good technical acumen given their role. I'm not saying they have to be a coder, but if you can't do a VLOOKUP in Excel, I don't want to ask you to be part of my program. I'm sorry. So there was that. I expected that. I expected you to be able to walk through an if statement and understand how a computer makes a decision. To me, that's an excellent base level because the blocks of automation code are just decision points, right? So that is, that was important to us. But I mean, full disclosure, especially at the beginning of the program. So before the citizen developers came on, we kind of did it in two waves, right? So Jose, who you'll meet in a minute, and myself started the program, and then we expanded. It was successful enough that we got to expand it, so it obviously worked out. But it took us a very long time to get our hands on any trusted IT resources. We were working within Excel documents. We asked for SMTP permissions for email, and they laughed us out of the room. So that I experienced that, and part of the reason I'm in my position is my boss likes to joke that he likes me because I'm not afraid to break glass. So I'd say, okay, fine, I can't do it that way. What if I do it this way, where you don't get upset with me? Or what if, okay, fine, you don't want me to get SMTP? Well, C-suite, I can't do this because IT says I can't access email. So you need someone who's empowered to do that. If you're just a developer without that support, I could see it dying there. But we had that support, and I was careful to only take out the bat when I needed it.
Sure, that makes sense. So I think I heard a couple things there. One, reiterating that executive sponsorship and that executive support is critical, making sure you have that broader focus. Two, it's perhaps a bit of a journey. It sounds like over time you've been able to get more and more access, probably appropriate access, maybe different access for different people.
Sure.
What has that journey been like with the IT team, and how have you built that trust?
Well, it's an excellent point, and it is about the journey and not the destination. We know the destination is to automate whatever we can and be the best digital supply chain company in the world. But how do we get there? And that is the journey. So I will say the buy-in was over time. Again, we needed to gain their trust. We ran through projects where we proved our value. One of our first projects was we were taking on a new client that had many sites. I mentioned we build the world's best mousetrap. We had to enter in a ton of new business units into PeopleSoft without a template to do it, and without a person to do it. And I said, sure, give it to me. That's a point and click and paste. Like, that's cake. And we were able to automate the upload of an entire new client with, the number escapes me, but say 20 sites. Each one had to be entered into production, UAT, and development. And it all had to be done before they got on board. We couldn't do business with them. So that was a major, milestone, I would say, for us, where we got IT's attention and said, oh, they can do this. Now we kept doing things like that. We have robots that check pricing based on our history. And as we develop some of these cooler things, well, let's just say the buy-in is to the point where our fledgling automation team, half of it got absorbed, half of two people, one of us, got absorbed into IT as a developer, because that was the level of buy-in, the level of success they realized we could obtain. They created a position for him within IT. So I think that says quite a bit.
Wow, that's actually, I think, a huge testament to the program, because what you're saying is you started off as something where that was untested, unproven within the walls of SDI. You've over time built that trust, and then even to the point where now it's open arms coming in and saying, let's figure out how we can work together at a deeper level.
Exactly. Nailed it.
That's awesome. So we've talked about the cultural shift that's happening, the perception shift. I don't think this started with RPA from the way that you're talking about it. It sounds like RPA is fitting into the way that you're evolving. Can you tell us a little bit about what that evolution looks like, and how RPA has fit into your cultural and upskilling initiatives?
Sure. RPA, we started our RPA journey at the end of 2019. I mean, we were exploring, through the year, but that's when we signed a contract. And, we had already been on the journey of promoting data literacy, implementing a business intelligence solution for enterprise-wide, which we call Zeus Analytics, a mobile application, which, takes the seamless process of ordering things, from a B2C straight to B2B clients, which is unique in our industry because, try order a plumbing fitting online. It's pretty tough. And we've done a good job with that. So where RPA fits in is the new SDI employee. We were MRO for your enterprise. That's what we called it. And, at one of our town halls about a year or two ago, we put our flag in the sand and said, we are not MRO for your enterprise anymore. We are the digital supply chain company. And I think that speaks to all those initiatives, the upskilling of the workforce, the analytics, the mobile application development, and of course, the RPA. So with the RPA, although we have X amount of developers, and although they may be, interacting with processes without realizing those robots are there, or they might be, looking at their analytical dashboards every day without realizing the robots play a part, the fact is we have a digital supply chain ecosystem that consists of all of these tools, and RPA is an integral part to it. It's one of the newer parts, but it's also one of the most exciting parts because of the opportunity.
That's great. I love that story. One more question, and then I really want to get to your citizen developers and learn a little bit more about their experiences and their journey through this. Put simply, what does success mean to you? What does success look like?
So, it's an interesting question. It's a loaded question. I decided to make an arbitrary goal for myself that if I accomplish it, I would be successful, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do it. So I haven't gotten there yet, at least for this year. But what it is we had a 2-person team, right? Jose and myself, right? And it was so successful that when I went back for the renewal, and I've admittedly been promoted a few times. So my first time wrangling with the contractual obligations and things like that. And I'm going back for my renewal. And I'm saying, I hope we can get maybe one more developer, and I get, this is great. How about 10? So I think that right there would prove out, the success. So that was our first year. Now that we've got 10 citizen developers, understanding, a citizen developer is not created equal with a dedicated developer. My goal is, in terms of resources and dedication and stuff like that, my goal is to double the size of our citizen developer team by our next contract, which is in November. So we currently have 10, we're gonna have 20.
That's great. I love it.